Jai Shri Krishna, Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vyāsadeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'm going to continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is Canto 5, Chapter 25, Text 7. And this chapter discusses the glories of Lord Ananta, Dev, the incarnation of Krishna as Ananta. So, this is translated with commentaries by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, dedicated to spreading Krishna consciousness throughout the world for the benefit of all living entities. And regardless of what spiritual culture someone may be practicing, the information coming out of the Krishna consciousness movement will help everyone to advance further and further in their practices. The basic principle being devotional service. So, that is all the Bhagavatam deals with, is devotional service, which is transcendental to the material plane. So we're hearing here about Lord Ananta. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 7. Sukadeva Goswami continued. So this is a conversation between self-realized soul, devotee of the Lord, Sukadeva Goswami, it's a conversation he's instructing and giving information to Parikshit Maharaj, who is also a devotee, who has forewarning of how much time he has left in that particular body. He's going to be dying very soon, so he's inquiring what is the duty of someone who's about to pass away, who's about to transition out of this body to somewhere else. What is the duty of such a person? And the duty is to hear messages of Godhead. So this is Sukadeva Goswami. He's presenting these messages of Godhead to Parikshit Maharaj, who is about to leave. And they are surrounded by many, many sages and saints who also are very, very eager to hear these messages of Godhead, because Maharaj Parikshit knew he had forewarning of how much time he had left. But actually, anyone could leave at any moment. He was just fortunate in that he knew the exact time when he would have to leave. So the rest of us, we may not know exactly when. It could be in 5 minutes. So it's a good idea to hear these messages of Godhead. All right, text 7. Sukadeva Goswami continued. The demigods, the demons, the urigas, serpentine demigods, the siddhas, the gandharvas, the vidyadhars, and many highly elevated sages constantly offer prayers to the Lord. Because he's intoxicated, the Lord looks bewildered, and his eyes, appearing like flowers in full bloom, move to and fro. He pleases his personal associates, the head of the demigods, by sweet vibrations emanating from his mouth. Dressed in bluish garments and wearing a single earring, he holds a plow on his back with his two beautiful and well-constructed hands. Appearing as white as the heavenly King Indra, he wears a golden belt around his waist and a Vajayanti garland of ever-fresh tulsi blossoms around his neck. Bees, intoxicated by the honey fragrance of the tulsi flowers, hum very sweetly around the garland, which thus becomes more and more beautiful. In this way, the Lord enjoys his very magnanimous pastimes. So, we have information here that incarnations of the Lord and the Lord himself are not that as a very, very old, decrepit person. That is not the personality of Godhead. The personality of Godhead is the supreme enjoyer and is ever youthful. Although he's the oldest person and the source of all creation, he does not have the form of aged and tired and debilitated, cranky, unhappy, miserable kind of ancient appearance. He's youthful. And he's enjoying like anything. He has that enjoying spirit. He is that enjoying spirit. Let's put it that way, because he is spirit. So, I'm curious here exactly who is being described. Let me go back a verse. Yeah? This is Lord Sankarshan, Anantadev. Of course, he's an expansion of Lord Balaram, so we see a lot of Lord Balaram's qualities there. He has the plow, and his eyes are rolling. He's intoxicated. He has a plow on his back. He appears whitish. And he has a garland, beautiful flower garland, ever fresh tulsi blooms around his neck. And the bees are humming around this garland. And he is surrounded by different associates and different servants, and different personalities, saints and sages, who are always offering him prayers. And he's responding with sweet vibrations from his mouth. He's interacting and responding. So, showing his pleasure, obviously. 8. Text, there's no commentary there, so go into text 8. If persons who are very serious about being, well, you know, when we hear these descriptions of someone enjoying like that, for a materialistic person who is identifying with their material situation, gross and subtle, as somehow in competition with the Lord, then they become envious when they hear this description that there's someone like this, so powerful and is enjoying so intensely the Lord of all creation. They become envious. They want to be in that position. They want to take that position. They want to enjoy like that and become envious. The devotee is not envious. The devotee's ecstatic in their relationship with the Lord. become joyful and intoxicated by glorifying the Lord, by associating through devotional service with the Lord. Enter into the same spirit. So the envious person can't enter in. They can simply try to imitate and perhaps experience a dim reflection of something that sort of resembles this spiritual ecstasy of the Lord for a brief moment or two in time. For all their endeavors, they just get a brief reflection which doesn't last. But the devotee who becomes ecstatic by glorifying the Lord and making a connection through devotional service, they enter in. They enter into the pastimes of the Lord. No need to imitate. They don't lose their identity. They enter in as a servant. And in that sense, become one spiritually. But not losing the identity. It's the oneness is the spiritual nature. The difference is keeping the individual identity. The Lord is unlimited, and the jiva, we're minute. So the difference is primarily in the quantity, but the quality is there. So the Lord is the source of all pleasure. He's a reservoir of all pleasure. And the little tiny infinite jiva soul if they become envious, then they try to imitate that. And it doesn't work. So the Lord's always trying to reestablish that loving relationship so the jiva can enter in. But it is free will. You have that free choice. So there's no meaning to a loving relationship without free will. To choose, make the choice. If you choose not to, then you can remain in the cycle of birth and death and keep trying to make arrangements to enjoy and have those arrangements destroyed lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. So, or choose to establish that relationship with the Lord through non-enviousness, love and appreciation, attraction, and no more cycle of birth and death. Enter in. No more identification with the external covering, either gross or subtle. Become purified by the potency of the devotional energy, devotional service. Free from illusion. All right, text 8. If persons who are very serious about being liberated from material life hear the glories of Anantadev from the mouth of a spiritual master in the chain of disciplic succession, and if they always meditate upon Sankarshan, the Lord enters the cores of their hearts, vanquishes all the dirty contamination of the material modes of nature, cuts to pieces the hard knot within the heart, which has been tied tightly since time immemorial by the desire to dominate material nature through fruitive activities. Narada Muni, the son of Lord Brahma, always glorifies Anantadeva in his father's assembly. Therefore he sings blissful verses of his own composition, accompanied by his string instrument, or a celestial singer, known as Tumburu. Yeah, the Lord enters the cores of their hearts. So how does the Lord enter the core of the heart? The Lord is actually there already. The Lord's actually there in his form as Paramatma. Paramatma, the super soul, is allowing the living entities to fulfill their desires. Material desires, spiritual desires, whatever the desires are, super soul is there, giving the intelligence and the guidance how to fulfill those desires, whatever they are. When someone becomes serious about liberation, in other words, they're not in denial anymore of the miseries of trying to enjoy and control the material energy. When they're frustrated enough, perhaps they had a huge fortune and it was all lost, or they had a loved one who passed away untimely, or they suffered from a terrible disease for a period of time, or many different things which show the living entity by direct experience the nature of the material world. That may cause someone to consider very, very deeply and sincerely, what is the goal of life? How can I get free from this suffering? Is there God? Is there something higher? And they begin to search and seek like that. Suffering is one motivation. There are others who are simply motivated by the desire for knowledge. They're inquisitive. There's different motivations. Whatever the motivation, someone has that motivation. Say, very serious about being liberated from material life. They hear the glories of Anantadeva from a spiritual master in chain of disciplic succession, which means these messages of Godhead are not being changed, being handed down purely, as they come directly from the Lord himself through his pure representatives from the beginning of the creation of this particular universe. That is disciplic succession. And if they always meditate on this Sankirtan that they're hearing about, the Lord enters the cores of their heart. So Paramatma is there. Krishna is there in his Paramatma form. And when someone turns to this Paramatma, when they have that desire to meditate on Lord Sankirtan, they're attracted by hearing the pastimes, the activities, the form, and the name of Lord Sankirtan. Sankirtan appears within the heart. He's already there as Paramatma, but he expands within the heart as Paramatma. There expands as Sankirtan. He manifests. So the Lord is already there. When he sees the sincerity of the living entity to find him, the living entity becomes attracted to him, no longer totally blinded by desire for external engagement in the material situation. when they begin to seek out the Lord within the heart, Paramatma expands. He expands out into Sankarshan. We have that connection always with the Lord. And when we turn to Him within the heart, and He manifests, He enters the core of the heart. The connection's always there. It's never lost. It's always there. This is the path back home, back to Godhead. The Lord manifests within the heart in different ways. When the living entity is not interested in the Lord, then He remains as Paramatma and just fulfills everyone's desires, order supply, because the living entity relates to Him as the order supplier. I want this, I want that, give me this, give me that, on and on and on. But and He does, He supplies. It's not hard for Him. He owns everything, maintains everything. It's not difficult. But when the living entity turns, either through frustration or desire for something different, or suffering, turns to the Lord, and the Lord manifests. Not just as Paramatma, He manifests as Sankarshan. This is the Bhakti Lata Bij. It's planted in this way. This is the sprouting of the creeper of devotion that grows within the heart. And this seed that allows Anantadev to manifest is hearing these messages of Godhead from the pure representative. That gets the seed planted and germinated. And it is also the watering process. Keep watering by hearing and chanting. So Narada Muni is described here as always glorifying Anantadev. He sings verses of his own composition in his father's court, his father's assembly. And his father is the most powerful living entity in this universe. He is in charge of the creative function. He's on the heavenly planet, Brahmaloka. Prabhupada's commentary. None of these descriptions of Lord Anantadev are imaginary. They are all transcendently blissful, full of actual knowledge. However, unless one hears them directly from a bona fide spiritual master in line of disciplic succession, one cannot understand them. Yeah, that's because of the devotional energy, the pure transmission of these messages. There's a potency there, just like chanting the holy names of the Lord. The Lord has invested all His transcendental potency in His holy names. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. But when those names are heard from someone who's contaminated, it has a poisonous effect. The holy name always has an effect. But when heard from the lips of a pure devotee, then because of the devotional energy, the devotional purity, it cuts through the material coverings and stirs the heart. So without that messenger that pure spiritual messenger, that spiritual potency is not available. And so, not able to enter in. We say understand, not able to understand these messages, this knowledge. Because the heart has to be awakened, and that comes through devotion. So just reading or hearing without that devotional connection, it's like a mental exercise, although it's purifying. Better that than nothing, but the real potency comes through the pure representative, the pure spiritual master in line of disciplic succession. This knowledge is delivered to Narada by Lord Brahma. And the great Saint Narada, along with his companion Tumburu, distributes it all over the universe. So here we're hearing Tumburu is actually a personality. He's described as a musical instrument, a stringed instrument, veena, but actually Tumburu here is actually a companion, a personality. The spiritual world is like that. There are no things there. There are no things, because there's no material energy. So on the spiritual plane, everything is actually a conscious living entity serving in a particular way. So this particular personality serves in the form of a stringed instrument in the hands of Narada Muni. It's like Krishna's flute is not just some material object, dull object. It's a personality who serves Krishna by taking the form of his flute. Being used by Krishna. So here, Tumburu is being used by Narada Muni, and he's taken the form of a stringed instrument. He travels with Narada Muni. Narada Muni uses him. And he's completely surrendered like that. They go all over the universe with Tumburu. Narada Muni's companion. Sometimes the Supreme Personality of Godhead is described as Uttama Sloka, one who is praised by beautiful poetry. Narada composes various poems to glorify Lord Ananta, and therefore the word Samslokayam Asa, praised by selected poetry, is used in this verse. The Vaishnavas in the Gaudiya Sampradaya belong to the disciplic succession stemming from Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma is the spiritual master of Narada. Narada is the spiritual master of Vyāsadeva, and Vyāsadeva wrote the Srimad Bhagavatam as a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. Therefore, all devotees in the Gaudiya Sampradaya accept the activities of Lord Ananta related in the Srimad Bhagavatam as authentic, and they are thus benefited by going back home, back to Godhead. The contamination in the heart of a conditioned soul is like a huge accumulation of garbage created by the three modes of material nature, especially the modes of rajas, passion, and tamas, ignorance. This contamination becomes manifest in the form of lusty desires and greed for material possessions. As confirmed herein, unless one receives transcendental knowledge in disciplic succession, there is no question of his becoming purified of this contamination. It's pretty well laid out, pretty clear. You can see the value of the association of pure representatives. Since the problem is a problem of contamination, The solution is going to be purification. But not purification simply by performing austerities or rituals or sacrifices, but purification by coming in contact with the pure representative. It's said that even a fraction of a moment's association with such a devotee or representative can completely change a person's life. At least they begin. They start going in the right direction. So we see here that Lord Brahma, he received knowledge, transcendental knowledge, and a connection with devotional service directly from Krishna in the beginning of the manifestation of the material universe. This particular manifestation of this particular material universe. This is not a one-time event. This goes on perpetually. Unlimitedly. So, at that particular time of manifestation, he received this knowledge directly from Krishna within his heart. And his son is Narada Muni, who appeared from Lord Brahma and is also, Lord Brahma is also his spiritual master. And Narada Muni is the spiritual master of Vyāsadeva, who wrote this Bhagavatam. So that is the disciplic succession right there. And throughout time, those who have represented Vyāsadeva, passing the Bhagavatam down through time to us. So that is the potency that's being made available through Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, the Bhagavatam. Text 9. By his glance, the Supreme Personality of Godhead enables the modes of material nature to act as the causes of universal creation, maintenance, and destruction. The Supersoul is unlimited and beginningless, and although he is one, he is manifested in many forms. How can human society understand the ways of the Supreme? It's they're different energies of the Lord. And for the conditioned soul, the first step is to be able to distinguish the difference between spirit and matter. Matter takes its form according to spirit. And for the most part, the predominant idea in the industrialized worlds is that consciousness comes from a combination of matter. But actually it's the other way around. Consciousness is not developed from matter. Consciousness, or spirit, is a separate energy all its own, with two different energies going on at once. So to be able to distinguish spiritual energy from material energy is the first step. When that takes place, then can understand, enter in to the realizations that come from hearing these messages of Godhead. So, when they say the Lord has manifested itself in many forms, materially, Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. But spiritually, it's perfectly understandable. It's like, say electricity. It's an energy. And that energy can manifest cold, like in a refrigerator, or it can manifest heat, like in a heater, or it can run a light bulb, produce light. So many things electricity can do, because it's a separate energy. So the Lord can manifest according to what he needs to do. Spiritually, he can manifest in different ways. He can do anything, really. So the Supreme Soul is unlimited and beginningless, although he is one. So he enables the modes of material nature to create, maintain, and destroy. And he manifests as the personalities in charge of creation, maintenance, and destruction. Understood from the Vedas as Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Prabhupada's commentary. From Vedic literature we learn that when the Supreme Lord glances, sa aikshata, over the material energy, the three modes of material nature become manifest and create material variety. Before he glances over material energy, there's no possibility of the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the material world. The Lord existed before the creation, and consequently he's eternal and unchanging. Therefore, how can any human being, however great, a scientist or philosopher he may be, understand the ways of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? In other words, unless the Lord himself gives the knowledge, then there's no way to understand, because it's hidden. So scientists are doing their different experiments. They can't get there that way because they're still stuck on the material plane. Mind is also engaged in material activity. It's not just the gross physical body, but the subtle body, the mind, the intelligence, and the sense of self. They're the subtle material body. So without making connection with the source of consciousness, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then to simply try to understand how things are working, there's no access. It's like a rat caught in a maze, trying this card or trying that card or this card or that card or this there. But one who is above the maze can see, oh, if you go this way, you go that way, then you can come out of the maze and see things as they are. So that's the spiritual masters up above the maze. So unless the scientists and the philosophers take shelter of someone who has this knowledge, who has this vision, this understanding, who is engaged in devotion to the Lord, then just running around inside the maze. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Maybe it's this way, maybe it's that way. And then argue. No, my way is right. No, my way is right. So they can get the grant money. Nobody sees the actual situation. That this other energy, spiritual energy, is far superior. The following quotations from Chaitanya Bhagavat, Adikanda, tell the glories of Lord Ananta. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, the four Kumaras, Shanika, Sanatan, Sanandan, and Sanat Kumara, Vyāsadeva, Sukadeva, Goswami, and Narada are all pure devotees, eternal servants of the Lord. Lord Sri Ananta is worshipped by all the uncontaminated devotees mentioned above. He has thousands of hoods and is the reservoir of all devotional service. Lord Ananta is the original person and the great mystic controller. At the same time, he's a servant of God, a Vaishnava. Since there's no end to his glories, no one can understand him fully. So, there we go. He's the source, and he's also a servant of himself. Krishna expands like that, but nothing's lost in the expansion. It's like if you have a copy machine and you make a copy of something, it looks the same. But if you keep making a copy of a copy of a copy, it loses something. Lines start to blur, and it loses something as you keep copying. So that's not the kind of copy here. This is nothing lost in this expansion whatsoever. Krishna is there, the supreme original personality of Godhead, as Anantadev. And he appears like that as his own servant. It's inconceivable. But it is so. Lord Ananta is the original person and the great mystic controller. At the same time, he is a servant of God, a Vaishnava. Since there's no end to his glories, no one can understand him fully. I've already spoken to you of his service to the Lord. Now, hear how the self-effulgent Anantadev exists in the lower planetary system of Patala. Bearing his stringed instrument, the tambura on his shoulders, the great sage Narada Muni always glorifies Lord Ananta. Narada Muni has composed many transcendental verses in praise of the Lord. Simply due to the glance of Lord Ananta, the three material modes of nature interact and produce creation, maintenance, and annihilation. These modes of nature appear again and again. The Lord is glorified as one without a second, and as the supreme truth who has no beginning. Therefore, he's called Anantadev, unlimited. Who can understand him? His form is completely spiritual, and he manifests it only by his mercy. All the activities in this material world are conducted only in his form. He's very powerful and always prepared to please his personal associates and devotees. If we simply try to engage in the congregational chanting of the glories of Lord Anantadev, the dirty things in our hearts, accumulated during many births, will immediately be washed away. Therefore, a Vaishnava never loses an opportunity to glorify Anantadev. Lord Anantadev is known as Sesha, the unlimited end, because he ends our passage through this material world. Simply by chanting his glories, everyone can be liberated. On his head, Anantadev sustains the entire universe with its millions of planets containing enormous oceans and mountains. He is so large and powerful that this universe rests on one of his hoods like a drop of water. He does not even know where it is. While bearing the universe on one of his hoods, Anantadev chants the glories of Krishna with each of his thousands of mouths. Although he's been chanting the glories of Lord Krishna since time immemorial, he has still not come to their end. To this very day, Lord Ananta continues to chant the glories of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and still he finds no end to them. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. How could there be an end? This is eternal life. It can be an end. No end. Text 10. This manifestation of subtle and gross matter exists within the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Out of causeless mercy toward his devotees, he exhibits various forms, which are all transcendental. The Supreme Lord is most liberal, and he possesses all mystic power. To conquer the minds of his devotees and give pleasure to their hearts, he appears in different incarnations and manifests many pastimes. This manifestation of subtle and gross matter exists within the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Commentary by Prabhupada. Srila Jiva Goswami has translated this verse as follows. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all causes. It's by his will that this gross and subtle ingredients interact. He appears in various incarnations just to please the hearts of his pure devotees. For example, the Supreme Lord appeared in the transcendental incarnation of Lord Vraha, the boar, just to please his devotees by lifting the planet Earth from the Garbadak ocean. Hare Krishna. Text 11. Even if he be distressed or degraded, any person who chants the holy name of the Lord, having heard it from a bona fide spiritual master, is immediately purified. Even if he chants the Lord's name jokingly or by chance, he and anyone who hears him are freed from all sins. Therefore, how can anyone seek disentanglement from the material clutches, avoid chanting the name of Lord Sesha? Of whom else should one take shelter? So, Vrindavan Das Thakur, it was quoted in the previous, by Prabhupada quoted Vrindavan Das Thakur in the earlier purport, in his glorification of Anantadev. And Vrindavan Das Thakur has taken shelter of Lord Nityananda, who is the incarnation of Shankarshan. And here we see Sukadeva Goswami glorifying Anantadev. This is Vyāsadeva, actually, who's writing this. So it is actually Vyāsadeva who is glorifying Anantadev, Shankarshan, by recounting the conversation of Sukadeva Goswami with Maharaj Parikshit. So Vyāsadeva is glorifying Lord Sesha. And Vrindavan Das, in his Chaitanya Bhagavat, several times in different places, he states that he is doing the best he can to glorify the pastimes of the Lord, and he has taken shelter of Lord Nityananda, Lord Balaram, Shankarshan. But that at some point in the future, Vyāsadeva will elaborate on the glories of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, Chaitanya Leela. So that's interesting. some point Vyāsadeva will elaborate on the Chaitanya Lila. So here we see Vyāsadeva glorifying Lord Sesha by relating the conversation of Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Pariksit. Now in the translation, it's any person who chants the holy name of the Lord, having heard it from a bona fide spiritual master, is immediately purified. Even if that person, when they chant jokingly or accidentally, not even on purpose, just in the course of conversation, says something, and anyone who hears that person, who jokingly or by chance said the Lord's holy name, they also become freed from all sins. See how powerful the potency is when heard from the pure devotee. So, I think we'll stop there for today. Hare Krishna, Lord Anantadev, Lord Sesha, Lord Balaram, Lord Nityananda.